Alright, today's another what if video. It is a JoJo what if. I honestly should have saved this for October now I think about it for the spooky month stuff, but I don't know, I'm probably gonna put it into the spooky month stuff, unfortunately. You know, October tends to be that month, but yeah, I don't feel like doing it. I'm lazy. But anyway, today's what if is, what would happen if Stroheim became a vampire? I'm gonna assume this happens during the Santana fight. This was a request, but like some of the other requests, I've honestly kind of lost a lot of those requests. They're lost in the shuffle, unfortunately, but I was able to remember them. So today's what if is what if Stroheim became a vampire? So without further ado, let's talk about this timeline. So the question is, how would part two change? And that's gonna probably be the only part we talk about, since I really don't think Stroheim's gonna make it that long in the franchise as a whole, and I doubt parts 3 through 6 would change. But I can tell you in the comments if you want to go as far as to include Stroheim in parts 3 through 6 in this timeline. So in this timeline, part two kind of starts off the same, but Stroheim becomes a vampire. As for how, maybe in this timeline the stone mask that Straitso used can still be here, but honestly I don't even remember what happened to that stone mask. The way Straitso became a vampire with the stone mask. My memory of part two is not the best, so and I know I have a lot of part 2 fanatics here, so if one of you are watching this video, please remind me in the comments how what happened to the mask that not Santana, but Straitso used again. Because we'll say for the sake of this timeline, Stroheim can use that mask, and Stroheim can become a vampire with it. As for how this can work, it's kind of hard to imagine. Maybe someone gets blood on. Maybe Stroheim tested, like let's say it's a similar case to Dio, where Stroheim tested on, like let's say a German soldier, and then he finds out about vampires that way, kind of Dio like. They get killed to the sun, or maybe it happens in a place where there isn't sun at first, and then once they get killed by the sun, Stroheim realizes what happens with it, kind of like Dio. And Stroheim would eventually get to a point where he would use it. Um, as for when Stroheim can use it, I'm gonna say probably can go to Speedwagon about it. It's hard to say how Stroheim's gonna get information about the Stone Mask, but I think that's kind of the only hope I can see him becoming a vampire. That, or maybe during the fight with Santana, he becomes one with Santana putting his blood into him and him becoming a vampire that way. But in this timeline, how would the part two story go? Well, the fight with Santana would be different. Pillarmen canonically eat vampires, so yikes for Stroheim. But then again, with with him being very smart, and probably with vampiric powers as well, maybe having the Space Ripper stingy eyes that Dio has, I could see Stroheim potentially cooking up a plan, and that plan being enough to potentially wear down Santana. Now, I still think Stroheim might die in this timeline, or he could legit die because of the sun, but let's assume for the sake of the plot, Stroheim somehow survives. Now, with German science engineering and Stroheim potentially still using it, I could actually see Stroheim becoming a threat. Having vampiric immortality plus German science, Stroheim could potentially find a way to make it so that he's a vampire that can walk out in the sun. I don't know if he would have it by the first fight with Cars, granted, but I think later in the story he would. So the first fight with Cars, and I'm going to be honest, this is going to be a quick timeline since I really don't think Stroheim's going to be making it long in this timeline. When it comes down to it, the first fight with Cars I don't really think is going to change much in general. Granted, I could see him still having the gun he had canonically that he used against Stroheim, but I mean not Stroheim, but Cars. But honestly, I don't think it would be that useful. The Tommy gun in his abs. Uh, Overall, I don't think Stroheim would be that useful in general in this fight. And a big problem with Stroheim in this timeline in general is the fact that vampires are not really that strong against Pillarmen. So unfortunately for Stroheim, he's probably not going to do the best against Cars. But then again, if he can keep his distance, then maybe he stands a chance. That, and plus Joseph being by his side, can at least help him out there. It would be interesting to team Stroheim up with a vampire, with a hormone user, or at least having a hormone and a vampire, hormone user and vampire actually team up together. That's one thing that comes interesting in this timeline. But after that, I don't think after that nothing much would really change. Caesar's death still happens because Stroheim was gone by that point, so unfortunately we can't prevent that from happening. And then everything would kind of just go the same until the final fight with Cars. Once Stroheim makes his big return, he could use the UV light, but then again, it would kind of be a suicide mission. I mean, I think he could still kind of have his German science hacks while also being a vampire potentially. He could find a way to make it so that he's not affected by the sun, but then again, it wouldn't be that strong in general. Now, in my honest opinion, I still think Cars is going to be Ultimate Life Form because it was because of Stroheim doing something stupid with his UV lights, and Cars becoming the Ultimate Life Form that way. I still think in general the final fight would just play out the same, and Joseph and Cars' fight would go the same in general. Stroheim would still save Joseph, of course, and then Stroheim would actually probably die in this timeline once Cars uses Hamon. So Stroheim is most likely killed by Cars in this timeline due to Hamon. Joseph still dies in this timeline, and he obviously comes back and reveals he never died this whole time. Stroheim might actually die in the final fight of part 2, which is probably something I think would happen, and personally would have been a change I would have rather had than, him dying a couple of years later off screen. Uh, Assuming Stroheim survives part 2, I actually think there's a better chance he could have survived World War II. So if anything, I'd say there's a higher chance he dies in the final fight of part 2, but if he still survives, then I think there's a higher chance he actually survives World War II. Unless, something happens that makes sure he doesn't survive. Overall, I don't think too much would change in the story. Stroheim really didn't have a lot of screen time in part 2 in general, and I'm pretty sure Stroheim's going to be gone out of the story before parts 3 he could happen, so anything afterwards wouldn't change. Um, so I could go a timeline in the comments where I kind of go into parts 3 through 6, and it kind of becomes my Stroheim what if, but now a timeline where Stroheim's a vampire, so basically including Stroheim in 3, obviously including Dominic and Nico, his kids, and then that kind of leads into later parts in the story, like part 4, part 5, and then part 6, obviously, when you have all the other extra OCs in this timeline. So that's a timeline I could go into if you want in the comments. But overall, I really don't think JoJo would actually change in this entire universe. With the exception of part 2 having a couple of minor changes, I really don't think nothing would change in general. This timeline is kind of a short what if, and I really don't think there would be any big changes. So, hope you guys enjoy. Special thanks to whoever requested this, because I lost your comment, unfortunately. So, have a good day. That's all I can really say. Should have uploaded this on October now that I think about it, but oh well, we all do stupid stuff and forget about the past. But yeah, one day I'll get my maybe spooky what ifs, the spooky what if videos for Halloween could come back. I'm probably not gonna do it this year. Unless I can think of some cool ideas. If you can pitch some ideas in the comments, that could be cool. I'll try them, but I don't think I'm gonna do them. I don't know if I'll do it this year, unless you pitch some cool ideas. Thanks for watching, and I'll see everyone next time. Peace.